Welcome to No One Gets to Fall Apart, a conversation about mental illness and family ties with author Sarah LaBrie, class of '07, in conversation with Brenda Barbour, class of 1986. I'm Leora Tannenbaum, class of 1991, and the chair of the Pembroke Center Advisory Council's Programs Committee. On behalf of the Friends of the Pembroke Center for Teaching and Research on Women and our co-sponsors, the Brown Women's Network and the Disability and Neurodivergence Alumni Collective, I'm delighted to welcome you to this evening's event. Please tell us in the chat where you're logging in from and what your affiliation is. Are you an alum, parent, student, faculty or staff member, or a community member? We'd love to know who you are. And if you feel up to it, please share a sentence in the chat about how you're doing today. These are heavy times, and it's good to be connected with each other and in community. The research and teaching of the Pembroke Center explore social change and how questions of difference in gender, sexuality, race, class, religion, and more affect our thinking and our world. I want to call your attention to the group of supporters known as the Friends of the Pembroke Center. It's the Friends Advisory Council that organized this event and that organizes other programs with the objective of connecting alumni and other communities with the Pembroke Center. So now let's get to the program. Over the next hour, we will explore mental illness and family ties, jumping off of the extraordinary memoir, No One Gets to Fall Apart, by Sarah LaBrie. If you haven't read it yet, I strongly encourage you to order it now. This book cuts to the quick and stays with you long after you have finished the last page. No One Gets to Fall Apart was a New York Times notable book and finalist for the Writers League of Texas Book Award. Lori Moore calls it a brilliant memoir, a triumph of every kind of literary perseverance. NPR says it is a remarkable meditation on the blurry line between madness and artistic brilliance. And the New York Times says it is both urgent and imaginative. I will introduce tonight's speakers in a moment, but first, I invite you, as you listen to this dialogue, to consider any questions you may have for the speakers and to share those questions through the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Following the conversation, we will take as many questions as time allows. With that, I am honored to tell you a bit about Brenda and Sarah and to invite them to join me on screen. Sarah is a television writer for a number of series, including Minx, Blind Spotting, Made for Love, and Love, Victor. Sarah has also written libretti that have been performed at Walt Disney Concert Hall and the Apollo Theater. She has received fellowships from MacDowell, the U-Cross Foundation, Yaddo, Sewanee, and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and was nominated for Best Television Comedy Script at the 2024 Women's Image Network Awards for her work on Blind Spotting. Brenda is co-founder and co-host of the Body Wealth podcast. If you're not already familiar with this 5-star rated podcast, make sure to check it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. This podcast centers the health and healthcare experiences of Black women, empowering listeners to advocate for their own care. Brenda, who lives in Washington, D.C., is also the organizer of a Black women's health retreat launching next month. Brenda was a regular commentator for WAMU's Metro Connection with additional commentaries broadcast on PRI's Marketplace and NPR's All Things Considered. Previously, she spent more than 15 years at the World Bank, leading communications teams, earning 7 awards for leadership, teamwork, knowledge sharing, and information management. Sarah and Brenda, take it away.
Thank you so much. That was so kind. That was such a lovely introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Leora. That was lovely. I said this personally to Sarah, but I just want to say it so everyone can hear in case they haven't read your book. This is a wonderful book. I loved reading it. It's beautifully written, and it just made me think a lot about things in my own family and my own life. So I want to personally thank you for giving us this gift.
Thank
Um,
you. That means a lot.
so why don't we start by you just telling everyone what inspired you to write this memoir?
Sure. So my book is about the year that my mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It's called No One Gets to Fall Apart. And I was kind of in the middle of this battle with myself. I had been trying to write a novel for 5 years that I thought was going to change my life. I had an MFA in fiction from NYU. My dream had always been, be in the Paris Review, be in the New Yorker, be Zadie Smith, basically. And I had really devoted everything I had to that. I had no plan B. And I was failing. I was failing miserably, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And then my mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and all of a sudden I couldn't care about the novel anymore at all. It kind of went from being my whole life to not being anything that mattered to me. But I did really want to understand how my family had missed the signs. And since I was already in the habit of writing every day and writing so much, I kind of had to write my way through that story to try and figure out how this had happened, that my mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia in her 50s and no one had known it was coming.
So, what did you conclude about how they missed those signs?
I think there's a lot of signs that we ignore, especially as women, especially as mothers. I think we are expected to take on a lot, and symptoms that might otherwise be caught just get kind of dismissed as stress or anxiety. And that was definitely what was happening in my mom's case for sure until she just broke and you couldn't ignore it anymore. It was an extreme case, is something that I think probably happens often.
Yeah, and then you have to look back on your childhood, and you see those experiences with a new light when, as an adult, you found out this diagnosis. Did it change anything for you on how you think about mental health, how you think about navigating your own life?
Yeah, so I would say like part of the reason I started writing this story was I was 33 when my mom was diagnosed. I sort of was in the process of getting engaged. I'm not married, and I really wasn't sure if I was ever going to be able to have a child because I had had such a difficult relationship with my mom, and schizophrenia is heritable to some degree. And I thought, okay, well, if I write and I rewrite this story and I understand it and I get to a meaning, then I can figure out who I am, and that will help me become a better mom if I decide to become a mom. But then in the process of doing it, I realized, like, no, I can do this for myself. I can do this to become a healthy adult, and that matters just as much. I feel like it's so easy to ignore sort of the weight that we each are carrying. You think you're supposed to always be servicing someone else, but as I kind of took this on, I realized like my mom would have benefited so much from a project like this, from really
Mhm.
excavating her past. My grandmother too. Um, so it was kind of like the story, telling the story, figuring out the story itself is what made the meaning.
Right. That's good. That's good for you, but it's also going to serve that purpose for others who read it, I think. Um, so let's talk about your grandma since you mentioned her, because I think it was your great grandmother who, in the process of protecting your grandmother, who was being stalked and harassed by her former partner, your great grandmother ended up being criminalized and sent to jail. And I think we're all familiar with the police's history of not protecting women when they experience violence from someone they know, from a husband, from a partner, from a family member. But actually taking it the step further and sending her to jail, how did that knowledge inform how you think about, well, many choices in your life, but law enforcement, who you date, whatever things, what things did that bring up for you?
I mean, I had sort of grown up hearing these family stories like everyone does that were kind of very broad strokes surface. I knew that my grandmother had had a difficult relationship with her mother, my great grandmother. She had depression. She sort of took to her bed at one point and never really got out again. But I didn't know the other stuff. I didn't know that she had defended my grandmother from her abusive husband and gone to jail for it. And when I found that out, it sort of changed a lot of what I understood about how my grandmother saw her own life and why she was the way she was. So part of my goal for the book became showing these multiple generations of Black women and their response to depression and mental illness because my great grandmother did have serious depression. Um, I didn't know her, I never met her. I know that her response to it was to basically abdicate from mothering, except for that one moment that you described, and take to her bed. My grandmother became a very successful businesswoman in Houston. She was a housing attorney. She formed her own law firm at a point, and then she ran a healthcare business. And she chose not to feel her feelings at all. And this is a woman who was born in 1945, Black in Texas. Spent her entire Our entire community was Black when I was growing up, so this wasn't a question of her sort of like coming up against white racists. In Texas, in Houston, it's pretty easy to just sort of stay within a community for your whole life, and that's what she did. And she served this community, and just worked really hard, right? And then my mother felt her feelings so much that she was unable to control them. And then I tend to intellectualize my feelings, to distance myself from them. And I'm not saying there's one right way to feel or experience mental illness at all, but I just think that analysis of that helped me understand my mother and my grandmother and even my great grandmother to such a greater degree than I ever could have.
Yeah, and they all sort of dealt with the trauma in different ways, but it seems like you came through, and maybe it's because you had therapy. No, did any of your mother, your grandmother, your great grandmother have therapy before the crises? No, yeah.
No, I mean, there's a moment in my book where my grandmother says Black people don't go to therapy. We just fake it till we make it. And meanwhile, my mom is sort of on the sidewalk, looks like an unhoused person, and is talking to herself. These sort of two scenes juxtaposed, these two moments, these two women juxtaposed in the same instance is kind of what the book is about. We don't go to therapy,
And
and
I,
then here there's
yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. But your grandmother kept saying throughout the book, oh, she'll be all right. She just needs some more money. Like money was gonna fix it. And I think, how unfortunate was that? But
she's very practical. She's a really pragmatic person. Because she was like a mother figure to me, I had not really ever questioned her outlook before I really kind of dug deep into what happened here.
yeah. Well, I want to talk about therapy because I think, especially in the Black community, I think it's going away, but the stigma against getting the help you need is hurting so many people. And so, one of the things you did in the book was thank your good therapist. And, I know as women, as Black women, sometimes we have a hard time finding that good therapist or finding that therapy that really works for us. So, can you tell us a bit about how you found the good therapist, how you found the right therapies for yourself?
Yeah, so I had been raised in a household where therapy, the idea of it was kind of a joke. That was not really an option. I was extremely depressed when I was at Brown, to almost a suicidal degree, and so I did try to see therapists on campus, and there was a limit to the number of therapists or the number of times you could visit a therapist before you had to go out into the community and find it. And I was not equipped to do that. I was new to Providence. I didn't have a car. So I really was kind of suffering and struggling. And I realized this is something that I absolutely need. And when I graduated, would go, I would Google, look on Psychology Today, however it works, and test out various therapists. It took a long time. It was really hard. I will say that the best therapists I've had are ones that center on the body. So healing involving how your body is reacting to emotions, how you're processing emotions in your body. I did ketamine therapy, which, do you know what that is? I imagine.
Yes, I do. But maybe for the audience, why don't you describe it?
So it's a psychedelic therapeutic method where you go to a trained practitioner and a doctor injects you with ketamine and you hallucinate for an hour. And then afterwards, I would have therapy and talk about my hallucinations and how they related to my life and how they related to my past. And this woman was trained in this specific type of therapy, and we saw each other in a couple months. And that I think because whatever the drug does suppresses your nervous system, your I guess your tendency to sort of react immediately, you can't really do that under the influence of this drug. So you have to sit with the feeling in your body and you're able to kind of understand how you're feeling and why without immediately going to rage or sadness or shame. And that slowing everything down and being able to live inside my body without wanting to, again, intellectualize, escape, read, think through how I was feeling in a way that removed me from myself. Um, I could not do that. And that's the most effective form of therapy for me, for sure.
Well, I'm glad you found it, and I'm glad that you're doing better now. I had wanted the community members on the Zoom to hear a little bit of your voice from the book. I picked a section that was from, your grandmother, but we already talked about that. Do you want to read that section, or do you want to read another section, just a few paragraphs so they can hear your voice in the book?
Sure. Tell me again the page that you had suggested.
I had picked page 111 at the bottom, the last sentence of 111 to the third paragraph of 112.
Okay. All right, this is taking a second.
No.
Okay, so starting with when I asked my grandmother.
Yeah.
When I ask my grandmother to tell me more about my grandfather, she writes me back emails full of unadorned anecdotes that read as if she's writing about somebody else. She tells me that during an argument, he grabbed her by the hair and threw her against the wall so hard he sent her to the emergency room. When he dropped her off at work the following Monday, she called her brother to help her pick up my mother and Aunt Tina from daycare, got her things from home, and moved in with a cousin. My grandfather, who didn't want a divorce, made my grandmother's life hell, transferring his assets to his brother to avoid paying child support, breaking into her new house and ransacking it, stalking her through the city. My great grandmother, Alma, came to Houston to help her daughter move, and one day Vernon followed them into a parking lot, threatening to take the children. Alma brandished a steak knife she'd been keeping in her purse for just this purpose. He filed charges against Alma, and she did a short stay in jail. Now, I think it must have come as a shock to my grandmother that Alma protected her, given that, as she explained, Alma never seemed to like her very much. My great grandmother favored her two sons over her only daughter, and generally only addressed my grandmother to scold or threaten her. It startles me to realize how much my grandmother's mother resembles my own mother in her ferocity and sadness. My mother is repeating her own trauma in me, but Alma is inside of her too. Alma's mother, my great great grandmother, Sarah, was the daughter of an enslaved woman from Georgia and the son of the white man who purchased her at auction. So, what unknown history was Alma repeating? Do you want me to stop there?
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you. I do want to talk a bit about repeating histories because there are positive things that your mother brought to your life, and you talk about wanting to repeat those, but then you want to make sure you don't repeat the negative things. And have you thought about how you navigate that?
I mean, it's sort of the eternal question, right? It's Oedipal. It's that you're trying to outrun your fate, and then you run directly towards it. And I think about that every day. I think it's hard. It's hard. You carry that legacy, and every question, every choice you make is freighted with that question of, will doing this lead me down a path I've been fighting my whole life not to go down? And it makes everything twice as hard. And I don't know what the answer is except to not try to do it by yourself. I
Hmm.
I've been very lucky in that I have a wonderful partner. I have wonderful friends. It's very, very hard for me to let other people be nice to me, or to feel like I deserve that. And I think it's hard for most people who've had difficult childhoods, but it is the most important thing you can do. It's almost a form of caring for other people, is allowing them in, right? Allowing them to be a part of who you are. And that reciprocal relationship and community you build is that's the only salvation I've been able to find.
And I thought it was beautiful when your fiance, I guess now husband, when you were just throwing away everything, and he was like, I'm not going to let you throw away these things that matter so much to you. That was an act of care.
Absolutely.
And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Totally. There's I don't know if you know the book Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
kind of like a core text for me. She's a community activist and it's about effective activism, but specifically it's about how if you can have an immediate impact on your sort of very, very local surroundings, your household, your neighborhood, that will echo out and change the world for the better. And I try to live like that. I try to make sure that I'm providing care and allowing myself to receive care and loving the people around me because it always sort of exponentially echoes out. And I think, yeah, when I was having a mental breakdown, my husband being like, I know that you think your life is over, but it's not. I'm not going to let you destroy everything you love. Um, Changed my life, changed me. I mean, it's in my book, it's part of the reason the book exists at all. And that's because he chose to care.
Well, thank you to him. Lovely. Um, I want to circle back to the novel. So you mentioned that you spent 5 years working on this novel. It was a novel about time travel, right? The
Mm.
anatomy book. But in the book, you also talk about letting things go so that new things can emerge, right? And that can be related to relationships or this book project. But the writing of the novel almost felt like a character in this memoir. And so, can you tell us more about why that was so important to include in this memoir? And also, what did letting it go allow to surface in your life?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Um, the novel was something that I wanted to be perfect, and I couldn't make it perfect. I had a really solid opening 50 pages and then 200 pages that were very bad. And I spent so long trying to make them better. And at some point, I had to realize it's not about the thing that I can make perfect, it's about the thing that I can finish. And the thing that I finished was this book, and it isn't perfect, it's imperfect, but I think part of the reason it has resonated with readers is because I'm not approaching it from a place of perfection. I'm approaching it. I wanted this book to be a conversation. I wanted it to feel like a question that I am asking the reader that they can then answer however they want, however it applies to their own life. And I think with the novel, I thought I had to be sort of all knowing. Everything had to be pristine, right? And it turns out that that wasn't true. That's not that wouldn't have served anyone. Even if that book had gotten published, I don't know that it would have had the impact that I wanted it to because it was so distant, it was so closed, it was so insular. I was so closed off from the world. And I think it was letting go of that idea, that version of myself as a writer, that I have to be above the world somehow, was what freed me to actually become a writer.
Right. Well, perfection is such a burden because suffered from, and I think a lot of women suffer from this need to be perfect. And it's exhausting. And so when I was raising my children, I used to always say release perfection because I didn't want them to have that burden. Because really the truth is there is no such thing as perfect.
Right.
Nothing is perfect. And so that is just a mantra that I carry with me is release perfection. When those tendencies come back and I'm struggling with perfection, I just remind myself to release it. So beautiful that you have also done the same. I want to talk a little bit about motherhood because you talked about wanting to be a mother and also maybe not wanting to be a mother, having a little fears or concerns about it. So first, why don't you tell us a bit about both of those feelings and what drove that? And then I'll ask another question.
Sure. I mean, I think I grew up always thinking I would have children because when I was growing up in the 2000s and that was sort of the sense that was what life was. I'm from Houston, like it is sort of you get married, have a kid,
Expected.
get a house, have a job. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't really know it was a question. And then after my mom got sick, I really started thinking, well, is this responsible? Will I be in some way culpable if I have a child who can't be happy, who can't function in the world, and who is experiencing the pain that I see my mother experiencing every day? And it became a real question. I think at this point, I have decided I could be happy either way, and I'm not sort of actively trying to have children. I realize it's not necessarily an either or situation. It's just I could do that and I could do this. They're both great ways to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've chosen this one, but I'm not necessarily missing out on anything. I'm not necessarily like winning. It's just, it's a choice.
It's a choice. And then I always tell my young friends who are like, oh, should I have children? Should I have children? I'm like, nobody should have children if they don't want to have children. It's a lot of work. It's a challenging thing to do. So do it if that's what is really calling you, but don't do it because anybody else is expecting that of you.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then I want to actually talk about Black motherhood because, feminists have written a lot about the role of mothers. But then when you look at the media, it's like we're either the cause of all the problems in our community or the only thing that's going to save our community. And that's a heavy burden to carry for anyone. But what are your thoughts on the way we've been represented and the expectations of Black motherhood?
Yeah, it can be hard. It's hard to write honestly about having a difficult mother when you're Black because there is this sort of starvation that I feel too for positive representation and to not sort of feel like there's always a victimization happening or the story about Black motherhood has to be about suffering. And I don't think that I didn't want to contribute to that in any way. And so I did really try to make this a person first approach to narrative. I don't think, and I'm not saying my mother is not 100% good or 100% bad. I'm not 100% good or 100% bad. I'm making mistakes. I'm flawed. She's making mistakes. She's flawed, but she also is doing the best she can, like everyone. And I just really wanted people to see her not just as a Black mother, not just as a schizophrenic mother, but as a person, as a woman who grew up, who had a career from Texas, who tried her hardest. And what I'm hoping is that the story comes across as the story of this individual woman who has suffered, but also had accomplished a lot as well. But yeah, it's something I think about. I think about all the time. It's what kind of stories are we allowed to tell, and are we responsible for?
Right. And I think you painted your mother in a three-dimensional way. There was no sense in the book that she's just a schizophrenic mother or just a Black mother or just a difficult mother, because you also talked about the positive things she did to create a picture for what future she wanted you to have,
Yeah.
right? And it seems like you're living that future. So that's really great. How is your mom doing today? And do you have a relationship with her?
So she is medicated. She's living in a group home. She can't live with my family. We tried that. It did not go well. It's up and down, you know? I don't think there are a lot of 100% happy endings in situations where the mental illness is this severe. I think it's important to share that as well, that even if someone chooses to be medicated, they won't always stay medicated. Once that person goes off their medication, it's a completely different ball game. Part of the reason I wrote the book is because I wanted people to have a guide for what it looks like when you are dealing with a loved one with severe mental illness and sort of violent and criminal tendencies that come along with that. You have to protect yourself. We are doing everything we can to keep her safe while also making sure that my grandmother is safe. And
Mhm.
it's kind of we don't have the infrastructure in this country to care for people who need it in this way. And so it's kind of a day-to-day thing. Things are going well right now. We'll see where we are a year from now.
Thank you. I want to say to the community members on the Zoom that we are going to open up for Q&A in a few minutes. So if you have a question for Sarah, please put it in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get to that soon. But I also wanted to ask you about, yes, this country doesn't support people with mental illness. And so then it falls to the family members, to you, to your grandmother, to me in certain situations. But it's hard to support someone who is facing a mental health crisis when maybe you need to support yourself too, or maybe you have your own things that you need to address. So there was a time when you had to step away from your relationship with your mother. And can you talk about that and the balance between needing to absolutely care for yourself and also needing to be there to care for a loved one?
Yeah, so speaking for myself, when I was growing up, my mother had symptoms of borderline personality disorder. So she was not the kindest person to me. We didn't have a great relationship. She did want the best for me and she sacrificed a lot for me, but she was not nice to me. And one thing that I thought was once she got diagnosed and she went on medication, somehow the medication would make her nicer to me. But that didn't happen. I don't know if anyone has a borderline mother, but it doesn't, schizophrenia drugs don't cure that. And so she was still mean to me. And that was really frustrating because she was under a lot of stress. My family was experiencing a lot of pain. And then I would go see her and she would also be mean to me. And it was like, well, why add that extra layer on top of everything what we're going through? So it just
Right.
felt like too much stress for her and for me for us to maintain a relationship. And now, when I go back to Houston, I'll see her, but we're pretty distant. And it's a very sort of surface level, polite relationship, I would say.
And that's what you need.
Yeah.
So let's shift to talking about the creative process. Are you writing something else? And if so, I was very interested in the theme of alternate universes that you were playing with in the anatomy book. Is that a theme that you're revisiting?
Huh, that's interesting. Well, I also write for television, and I'm always trying to pitch TV shows about multiple worlds, and my reps are always like, "No, you can't do that." uh, but I'm still trying, and I'm not going to stop trying. I think, in terms of books, I'm working on a book about animal welfare and human welfare and how they're related. I do a lot of work in LA with the Animal Services Department. I foster dogs and I volunteer at the shelter. And there's these sort of very clear patterns between the way we care for unhoused people and people in need and the way we care for both their pets as a public service and the way we care for and think about animals in general. They're not separate. Animal welfare and human welfare
Mm-hmm.
are, especially in a city like Los Angeles, where there are so few resources for the people that need it, the way those resources get allocated to the departments that already have the most money is infuriating. And it's something that I'm sort of living with every day and that I've been wanting to write about for a long time, just like a forensic investigation of why a city as wealthy as Los Angeles can't care for its animals and its poorest people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's going to be something great to hear about. Before I move to Q&A, is there anything else that you wanted to share with the community about this book or about what you're doing?
Well, I would just say thank you so much for coming. I mean, like I said, I wrote this book to be a conversation. There has to be a second person in a conversation. And so every time anyone shows up to talk about it, it makes the book feel complete. It makes me feel like, I don't know, it deserves to exist. And I'm really grateful. So thank you.
Okay, let me see. if I could find the questions. Okay. I don't,
Mm,
are you seeing the
I
Marie?
see. Okay, if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's something that says Q&A.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So one person, Kisa says, really want to read your book, and I agree. She should read it. It's a really, really great book. LCUSCO-OTT says, do you think that it would have helped you to know your mother's diagnosis when you were growing up? My father had active bipolar disorder while I was young, so maybe not surprising that I'm now a clinical psychologist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was at Brown, I was taking every psychology class I could. I remember I took a great class called The Psychology of the Black Experience that really helped me understand my mother. I think when you're a kid growing up in that environment, if you have a parent with bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder, sometimes you'll tell people what's happening and they won't believe you because it's so strange. I think we are kind of wired to kind of dismiss out of hand some of the wackier things that people with severe mental illness will do because it's scary. That was definitely something I write about. That was part of my mom's experience when she was decompensating. But I think growing up, there were all kinds of things that would happen that I don't think anybody knew was happening and I didn't know how to talk about them because I didn't have the language. And if I had known that there were symptoms of a disorder that existed, I would have more readily trusted myself. I think I would have had a lot more confidence. So,
You would have known that, okay, this is not okay. This is something I need to get help
right.
with.
Because
Um,
what happens is that your sense of reality gets off kilter
right.
because your home life is so strange, but no one's acknowledging it. So,
And is it something you tried to keep a secret? Like, did you try to keep what your mom was doing from your friends, or was it
oh yeah,
something?
absolutely. Absolutely. Because there was no, once I got old enough to realize not everyone's life was like mine, there was a lot of shame around it because especially as a kid, you think it's your fault. You don't know.
Right,
My mom was like the axis of my whole reality. So,
right.
you
And you
know,
must serve whatever she's giving. So,
exactly. Yeah. She was a single
right.
mom. I was an only child. It was just the two of us in our house. So there was
I'm sorry.
no sense of normality.
So Anna Maria asks, can you talk a bit about forgiveness if you have forgiven your mother and the other women in your life, as well as forgiveness towards yourself?
Oh, I love this question. I've definitely forgiven my mother now that I understand what was going on. I think writing this book was a huge step in that process. I can't blame her for certain things that were not her fault. I have never thought about forgiving myself. I don't know.
Do you think you need to?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. That's definitely something to think about in therapy for sure.
um, let me see. Provocative question meant very respectfully. How are you currently thinking about pre-implantation genetic diagnoses? Oh, genetic screening of embryos prior to pregnancy. What may be gained and what may be lost with that technology?
That's something I've definitely thought about because there's this whole conversation around heritable diseases and having a child. Like, should you decide whether your kid should suffer or not suffer from whatever it is you're worried about them suffering from, or should you allow the person to choose? And that's something that I read a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just an individual thing. I understand for every mother, every parent, there's gonna have to be a different path forward. I have friends who've done IVF uh, who've had to make sure that their kids would not inherit a disease that would make the baby die when it was born. And I think that's really important.
Right.
I think it's a really important tool to have, but I also understand that a lot could be lost.
Right.
But I really think that's a individual decision. It's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, double-sided.
Very good. And Sylvina asks, what helped during the difficult moments when you were feeling underwater or overwhelmed?
Again, I think like having another person, really just allowing myself to be in a relationship. I know that sometimes I would just be like frozen in my brain and my body, and I like my shoulders would be up here, and my husband would walk in and he would go like that. And he push my shoulders down. And I think it's that, and it's also doing things for other people. So volunteering, getting out of the house, going for me, it was the animal shelter, but it could be anything. Doing something with my body and my hands that got me out of my brain. But
Talk about relationships a bit. This is not from the Q&A, but it's something I hope you'll be willing to explore this, because your relationship with Sadie, who you met at Brown, right? You were friends from college, and then were friends for many years after college, but then at some point you reached a point where, again, like the novel you were writing, that was a relationship I think you chose to let go. And so can you tell our community members a bit about that women's friendship and the arc of that, what it meant to you, why it was important to you, and then what letting go brought for you?
yeah, so part of one of the threads in this book is kind of the one of the biggest heartbreaks of my life was my best friend at Brown. We kind of came of age together. We were living in New York and both getting MFAs in creative writing. And she was much more successful than me, much faster. So there was a lot of jealousy, but she also did everything she could to help me. And then our friendship kind of culminates in this what felt like to me deep moral betrayal of information that she had about me, that she shared without my permission, but she obviously saw it completely differently. And I wanted this, like my relationship with my mom, I wanted to understand the loss of this relationship. I wanted to know, how I was implicated in it, what I could have done differently. Because at the time, it was all feeling. I was so hurt, I was in so much pain, and now I could kind of go back with the benefit of hindsight and analyze that loss and the role that I played in it. And something that was interesting was that while I was able to find a lot of models for writing about the loss of a mother or a mother with severe mental illness, it was very hard to find books about female friendships ending. And I don't, I thought that was so strange because everybody has their core friendship, and so many of us have dealt with friendship breakups. But I it feels like such an important topic. So yeah, I just that was really interesting to try and explore without a model. Um, yeah,
And
I don't.
sometimes we stay in friendships longer than we should because we don't have the model.
Yeah,
And we feel guilty, well, women are supposed to stick together and this person has been friends since college. So let me just keep it going. So what gave you the strength to say, actually, no?
well, I didn't. I was a coward. I just stopped answering the phone. And she did it because she was stronger than me. She's a stronger personality than me, and I think there was some other stuff going on there too. But yeah, I didn't cut off the friendship. I was just kind of hoping she would do it. I didn't want to take on that weight.
But you let it because she emailed you and gave you the choice,
Yeah,
like reach out
then,
to me or don't. And you were like, okay, I'm gonna not.
I'm
Right?
gonna not.
I guess she gave you permission.
Yeah.
But one of the things that raised for me is this: who gets to tell your story? Because I remember years ago I read something from Alice Walker, and she talked about um, with her family, I'm going to write what I'm going to write. And if you want to tell it differently, you could write a book too. And so that's complicated, right? Because also, if it's my story, a la what Sadie did, then maybe it's not your place to tell my story. So do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I can see one of the questions in the Q&A is what has the reaction to this book been from your family and friends?
Right.
And I think I went into it with that attitude of like, well, if they wanted me to write more nicely about them, then they should have acted better, which is from Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird, I think. I was ready to fight. I was like, this is my story. I'm ready to fight for it. But now on the other side, I am grateful that I did do my best to be as respectful as I could, because I do love all of these people, and I wanted that to kind of be at the forefront. I never wanted them to doubt that. And so I had to balance that, and I'm really glad I did because there's a lot of energy and momentum writing a book, publishing it, and then you come out on the other side and you still have to live and exist in the world and around these people, and you have to be able to defend what you wrote. And luckily, I was not put in a position where I had to do that. My grandmother, well, Sadie and I are no longer friends. I do not know if she's read the book. Um, Amy did reach out to me. Um, my grandmother chose not to read the book. And she told me, she said, I think it's going to make me sad. And the last thing I want to do is make my grandmother sad. So I was not going to push that. And my aunt read it multiple times. My husband read it multiple times, and they gave notes and feedback and even did like a late copy editing pass, which I was grateful for. So, you just never know how people are going to react. I thought so many people would be furious, and they weren't. They either weren't or they were flattered that they were in the book.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Um, any coaching for current students who are the children or close family members struggling with mental health challenges, young adults looking for resources for themselves or family members?
There is an organization called NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and they have support groups all over the country. They're free classes for how to care for a mentally ill loved one. They were a huge resource. I took their class. My grandmother took their class in Texas. They have books, manuals, all kinds of guidelines. So I would say that. And then there is a really good book called I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help. That is just a guide to helping a child or a sibling with a mental illness who's refusing help.
Okay. Well, how did you pick the name for your book?
No one gets to fall apart. That's funny. It was called the Anatomy book almost until publication day. It was called
Oh, this was called the anatomy book.
yeah, it was, and then at some point it had changed so much. My editor thought that wasn't really a fitting name, and we went through, I think some options were the arcades, the Holy One, other people don't live like this, and then no one gets to fall apart was the only one that me, my editor, and my agent all liked.
And what did you like about it?
It's true. I mean, you decide to fall apart, and then you still have to get up off the ground. You can't. As long as you're alive, you have to get up. So.
Yeah, and keep getting up and keep getting. Um, Back to thinking about your time at Brown, Mark asks, and you mentioned that you needed some support at Brown. What resources did you access, and what are your comments on the level of helpfulness while you were at Brown?
So there was therapy at the health services center where you could go and you could see a therapist. I think you could only go 3 times a semester or
Mm.
something like that. And then you had to go find a real therapist. And it was not that helpful. I will say at the time, the resources were not adequate. I think, yeah, they were not that helpful. Maybe they're better now. I hope they are, but there was not a
Yeah,
lot.
it would be interesting to hear. Um, so what else can we talk about? We can talk about
There are a few more questions in the chat that I'm seeing.
oh,
Well, okay, wait. Do you see this one from Karen? It seems like your time at Brown was really difficult.
no, I don't, but you can read it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't know who has access to the chat. Um, it seems like your time at Brown was really difficult. I feel like a lot of college students with struggling family members feel like college will be a relief and then come to college and sometimes feel worse than they did at home. What do you think it is about that separation or new environment that makes it so hard, and how could we change that to make it easier? Wow. That is spot on. I mean, I thought going to Brown would fix everything, and because I was getting so far away from home, and it made everything so much harder. Um, this is a very practical answer, but one thing I know that Brown did not do at the time, but maybe does now, is I didn't have a proper coat because I came to Brown from Houston and I'd never seen snow and I didn't know how to dress. And I think just being physically comfortable would have made a huge difference. I think I know I have a friend who I think she went to Harvard, but she said they would give people coats. And I was like, what a good idea. Just something to like make it more physically comfortable, to make your space more comfortable. I think that would have made a big difference because it was just the East Coast was so new to me. I didn't know
Yeah,
everything was so new.
that's interesting. Very practical
Yeah.
uh, advice. Okay, Sylvina says, not gonna lie, I wish I could fall apart, but it feels very difficult to have the ability to be allowed to have the resources to fall apart. Did you have an experience of almost falling apart? What helped you decide focus on taking care of yourself?
Yeah, I think the book is a record of almost falling apart. When I go back and I read it now, I realize how incredibly depressed I was while I was writing it. And then coming out on the other side, it was like a release. It was something shifted where getting the story down in a way that made sense to me is what saved me. And
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's research around that. I mean, there's a psychiatrist I write about named Dan Siegel who he has this great book called Mind, A Journey to the Heart of Being Human. And he says our understanding of our own stories, like the way we narrativize our histories, is a huge part of our mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think actually doing the work of sitting down and telling this story was the thing that kept me from a much worse fate than I.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Brown and in my 20s, I journaled so much and realized now that that was not just about journaling. It was about A, not falling apart, and B, healing myself. So I think that's true. But what else do you do now to keep yourself strong and healthy and well?
I try to not focus too much on my internal life these days. I try really hard to be doing things, creating things, finishing things, moving, getting out of my house, talking to people. Talking to people is huge. I'm in a lot of writing groups, I'm in a volunteer community. And not in a way that I'm trying to escape anything, but just in a way that I'm part of something bigger than myself. I feel like that is huge, just being a part of something larger than you.
Yeah. So living and doing something to make the world better. You're living in community, right? Living and being in community.
And
Yeah.
I'm lucky. I feel really lucky because I think Brown set me up for a life like that, where that was a huge part of, even though I did have a very difficult time at Brown, there was an understanding that you could organize your life around community service and around other people who had the same interests creatively as you. And
Hmm.
so that wasn't that sort of became a habit in college. I was in a co-op, I was on the College Hill Independent. I did all the things. And so now as an adult, I tend to seek out those groups as well because I
Yeah.
need to function.
And that's what I love about my Brown community. Like all my friends from Brown, whether it's their full-time job or their side gig, they're all trying to make the world better. And I think we got that from Brown. So that's really good. Well, we're like 4 minutes, 5 minutes away from the end. Why don't you just tell us what's next for you?
Right now, I am mostly focusing on television. I'm trying to uh I tried to adapt this book into a TV show. I got a grant from the Austin Film Society and it wound up becoming a little bit it's kind of strayed away from the core story here and became more just about Houston, about the bayou, about kind of the criminal underworld of things that are moving through Houston on the highways and through the waterways. And so that I'm kind of following that evolution and seeing where if it'll get set up somewhere where the story will land. And that's been a lot of fun. Just kind of I ran away from Houston. I really did not realize how formative it had been for me. And because of this book, which has brought me back to Texas a lot, and this fellowship, I'm finding a lot of stories in the place where I come from and trying to build those.
Powerful. Well, keep us informed as those things come out and we're available to see them. I'm going to turn it back over to Leora so that she can close us out. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been a joy to talk with you, and love your book.
Thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for being so open and thoughtful and honest and for talking about things that many of us are hungry to know about, but that too often go undiscussed. So truly, thank you. Brenda, wow, you are an extraordinary interviewer. You make it seem easy, but of course, we all know that your questions are exceedingly intentional. So thank you to you and to everybody in the community. Oh my God, it's just so wonderful how many people participated in this conversation. And thanks to everybody in the community who submitted their questions. This was more than just a one-on-one dialogue, although that piece was great. It was just so lovely to have this rich, robust community conversation. So thank you to all of you. I invite everyone, if you haven't already, to read the beautifully written No One Gets to Fall Apart and to listen to Brenda's podcast, Body Wealth. On behalf of the Pembroke Center, the Center's Advisory Council, and our Programs Committee, tremendous thanks to Sarah and Brenda. And thank you to everyone for taking the time this evening to attend this program. Our next Friends of the Pembroke Center event will take place on Saturday, May 23rd on the Brown campus during commencement and reunion weekend. If you'll be at Brown that weekend, make sure to attend as we will have a panel discussion about research at risk, threats to gender and sexuality scholarship. Watch your inbox for more information this spring. Thank you so much and wishing you all a lovely evening.